Laura Heywood. Lin-Manuel Miranda, you are the man of the moment, the man of the hour, the man of the year.
Thank you. I remember being Conrad Birdie, and all the girls in the grade had to faint when I sang. And I said, I'm doing this for the rest of my life.
Maybe you've heard of him, NFL superstar, Hall of Famer Joe Montana.
The game is just so much fun. I always say I wish people could go out on the field one Sunday afternoon and play the game. And win or lose, just to get that feeling of what it's like out there. Because there's nothing like it, and nothing like it around.
Tony Robbins.
And I just started to cry. And I realized in that moment, this happened because I did what was right. I didn't do things for brownie points. I didn't do it for positioning. My heart knew it was right, and I did it. And I was rewarded. It's like the money showed up.
But how is that different from me wanting to give my last paycheck to the Broadway show I want to invest in?
It's not different than that. If you did that once, it would be good. If you do it regularly, you're in trouble.
Fair enough.
Todrick Hall.
Todrick, I love you.
Thank you. You're so sweet. I think we're going to be best friends.
I agree.
I'm following you back on Instagram and Twitter right now, and it's going to be a BFF situation. You have no choice.
Welcome, Tori Amos.
Hi, Laura. What's going on in the world? We have to respond to that and work together every night, collaboratively. I think that's essential because it's important that we're sharing, yes, our stories, but we're also planting seeds.
Liza Koshy. You are both on screen and off, really setting an incredible example for the young people of today. And it's really been an honor to spend this time with you today, Liza.
I'm in love with you.
Let's get married.
Let's go.
Good morning. It's Laura Heywood. And this is Laura Heywood Interviews, episode 1. What a joy it is to be here. For those of you who are listening who don't know me, I assume you're here because of Derek and Romaine, my old friends. We worked together at SiriusXM for 10 years, and I've known them for 14 plus. So getting to join the DNR Studios family is a major honor for me. For those of you who are listening to me because you know me as BroadwayGirlNYC, thank you so much for the support over the years and for joining me on this brand new adventure. We're going to learn about it together. This is, like I said, it's an adventure. And I will tell you this. I spent about 6 hours yesterday scripting out the entire hour. It was like a This Is Your Life episode with audio clips from all my broadcasting history. And then I went back and I was like, this not only is kind of boring, but it's also kind of inauthentic. And this morning I scrapped the whole thing because I want to have a conversation with you. And there's something about a script, especially for live radio, that just didn't feel like the best way to utilize the airwaves. So I want to invite you, if you're listening live, to call in. 844-TALK-DNR is the phone number. That's 844-825-5367. I want to invite you to get to know me. That's what this hour is all about. The show is called Laura Heywood Interviews, and after today, I will have at least one guest for every show. At the very end of today's show, I am going to bring in a couple of guests to talk about a cause that's very important to me. But for today, the person you're getting to know is me. The interviewer can be you if you want it to be. So 844-TALK-DNR, 844-825-5367. So I think for those of you who don't know my online alter ego or the story behind Broadway Girl NYC, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. As I said, I worked with Derek and Romaine for a long time at SiriusXM. I moved to New York because I was recruited to work on a brand new channel based on Maxim magazine. This was in 2005. I would say that it was a different era, and I'd been working in sports talk radio in San Francisco. I didn't know anyone when I moved to New York, and guess who the most welcoming people in the building were? Derek and Romaine. They had me as a guest on their show really early on when I was brand new to New York, and as I said, they were some of my first friends. I worked in this space where we talked, because it was Maxim, we talked about like sports and comedians and cars and like, drinks and strip clubs and stuff like that. And it was maybe like, it was a portion of what I was interested in, but it didn't cover my whole identity. And identity is something I've been thinking about a lot because I created this other fractional identity online called Broadway Girl NYC. When I started at Maxim, we were heavy into MySpace. That's how long ago it is. That'll place it in history for you. And when Twitter came out, I didn't really get it. By then, I also had Facebook, and I didn't get why anyone would use Twitter for like when they could just use their Facebook status. But I was living in Midtown Manhattan, and I was going to a lot of Broadway shows. None of my friends from the magazine or broadcasting world were super into Broadway at that point, or like Derek and Romaine would have probably wanted to go to the theater with me, but they were on the air at the time, so they couldn't do it. So I kind of on a whim, just without thinking too much about what it would ultimately be, if anything, I created a Twitter account I called Broadway Girl NYC. And because I happened to have read a book about an anonymous blog, I didn't put my name on it. I just called her Broadway Girl. I didn't know that social media was going to become a phenomenon. I didn't know that Broadway was going to suddenly hit this era of being more mainstream, especially once Hamilton entered the fray, although that was years later. And my love for Broadway and my social media following grew in parallel ways. After 6 years of being anonymous and getting up to 25,000 subscribers on Twitter, I was invited to give a TED Talk where I revealed my identity. It was kind of like a coming out. Although it was not a sexuality coming out, it was like a Batman, like superhero reveal. I actually have a clip from the TED Talk that I gave. The whole thing is available on YouTube. It's about 6.5 minutes long. This is about, I'd say, like a minute, and it'll give you a little taste of what that was about. Broadway Girl NYC became a separate persona. I started referring to her in the third person. In fact, I jokingly called her my roommate in conversation after a guy I dated told me that being around me was like having two different women in the room at the same time. So she became my alter ego, sort of the Batman to my Bruce Wayne, you might say. And like any successful alter egos, Broadway Girl NYC and Laura Heywood led very separate lives and took great care to distance themselves from each other. Or I should say, I took great care to distance them from each other. I, Laura Heywood, worked at SiriusXM in an important corporate job, leading logistics from visits from movie stars, athletes, celebrity chefs, and quite a few Broadway stars. Meanwhile, I, Broadway Girl NYC, was tweeting about dream casting cult musical revivals and hanging out at schmackeries and dealing with long, cold lines at TKTS. I was tweeting every day, but I had to leave out my best stories because they were based on professional access that Broadway Girl didn't have. Because by then, she had become an aspirational character, a kind of archetype of the Broadway fan. It became all about spreading joy. For the people who couldn't be there, who didn't get to see the shows as often as I did, and who weren't experiencing those exhilarating brushes with greatness. Broadway Girl NYC has no troubles. She has no stress about work, traffic, bills, weather, or anything else except making it to the show on time. By donning the mask of Broadway Girl NYC, I, Laura Heywood, can access my happy place as often as I want, and I can share it. I am Laura Heywood, and yes, I am Broadway Girl NYC. I'm taking these two identities and merging them into one for the first time. So there she was. That was Laura back in 2015. So that's been 4 years, and so much happened in those 4 years. I thought I was leaving my radio job to go be a social media consultant. By the time I made my reveal, a few friends who were in on the secret, who worked in theater, had started inviting me to assist on the social media for their theater-related projects, including an off-Broadway musical that I totally fell in love with called Found. And Found was actually created by, or developed by, Story Pirates, the charity that's closest to my heart. And we're going to talk more about them and with some Story Pirates later in the show. That's sort of a sidebar or a preview of what's to come later in the show. But I expected that the fact that I'd created a social media phenomenon, for lack of a better word, without doing it on purpose, I thought, well, I can teach other people to do that. And actually, after I worked on Found, the producers said, we'd love to hire you to do this again, but, it's not like you're going to quit your full-time job. And I thought, well, 10 years is a long time. And, it would be fun to work in theater. And I never thought I could actually get hired to do this, but I guess I did a good job. And so I decided to take the leap. What I didn't expect was that people, now that Broadway Girl was more than just an avatar, people would want me to show up to things. So I started getting invited to attend fancy events like red carpets, opening nights, press previews, sneak peeks. Sometimes the shows will do performances for the press before even the official preview performances begin. And I suddenly could say yes to these things because I wasn't hiding behind a secret identity. But here's the thing. Once I started promoting myself with my photo, Broadway Girl wasn't a separate identity anymore. And in a way, she's kind of taken over a lot of what people understand about Laura Heywood. When Derek and Romaine invited me to join DNR Studios and to create a new radio show, I had a lot of people telling me, Broadway Girl is such a strong brand. You definitely need to do a Broadway Girl NYC radio show. And for some reason, something in me just resisted that. I felt like it wasn't quite right. And I couldn't put my finger on it for a long time. And then I realized that so often when I walk into a room, people go, hey, Broadway Girl. And while that makes my heart soar that people know me and they like what I'm doing on social media and in the world of Broadway, sometimes I'm like, I want to go to a baseball game, or I want to, blast hip hop music and geek out about that. And you should see the looks on some people's faces where they go like, sports? What would Broadway Girl be doing at an NFL game or Major League Baseball or, at a Jay-Z concert or whatever? And I'm like, man, I have so many interests. I have so many things that I'm excited to geek out about. Because going back to the idea of identity, Broadway Girl NYC for the last 4 years since that TED Talk, I think is the number one identity marker that people have for me. I think if you had to fill in the sentence, Laura Heywood, who's that? Oh, that's Broadway Girl. And I've been grappling with the idea of who I really am beyond my public persona. Certainly being on the radio is also a public persona, but I'm excited to introduce the people who know the Broadway side of me to a more well-rounded version of me. And also to remind myself that it's okay to have interests that seem to perhaps contrast each other. The identity that I have assigned to myself, rather than being, quote unquote, just Broadway Girl. And I just want to say I love Broadway Girl. Like, I love that. I love that that's a slice of the pie. But sometimes you don't just want peach pie, you also want blueberry cobbler or whatever. Or sometimes you want a cheeseburger. And I want to let myself embrace that whole meal, to stay with that sort of silly metaphor. I've realized that my whole life I've been an enthusiast. I get super, super excited about things. I think the earliest obsession I can remember was with Babysitter's Club books. I don't know if you read those when you were growing up. If you get obsessed about stuff too, I'd love to hear what you have identified with during your life. 844-TALK-DNR is the number, 844-825-5367. And you're welcome to give a call at any time during the live broadcast, which is noon to 1 every Monday and Wednesday. And I remembered that I had to get every book the day it came out, that I would sort them by who the protagonist was. I'd sort them by the color of the cover. I'd sort them chronologically. I would, I'd read them backwards and forwards, and I'd write fan fiction. And this was when I was like in 4th grade, maybe earlier than that. In high school, I was obsessed with the singer Tori Amos. She was she's like my idol in a major way. I collected every import CD. There was a time I had 15 versions of the Crucify CD single because so many different countries released them with slightly different album art or a different font on the CD insert. And I wanted them all because I really identified as a Tori Amos fan. I think if social media had existed then, I would have been Tory girl instead of Broadway girl. Or maybe I would have been like emo music girl. Although back then I was in high school from 94 to 97, 93 to 97. So I don't know that the word emo really existed, but I was really into like dark rock music, especially with female leads. When I went off to college, I started a radio show with all a cappella music. I was really, really into college a cappella, and I would have been a cappella girl if social media had existed then because I was so into it. Like, even though I was on a college radio station that had only, I don't know what the wattage was, but I think you stopped being able to hear it within, if you left 5-block radius of the college campus. This was at the University of Puget Sound. But still, I became known in this little a cappella world that was actually bigger than you might think because I got my name printed in an a cappella newsletter with the address of my college radio station. And suddenly I was getting hundreds and hundreds of CDs. This was in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, when CDRs, like burning your own CD, started to be a thing. So every college a cappella group in the country for the first time could record their own album, even if it was like in somebody's basement, instead of having to pay a huge sum to go into a recording studio. And so I basically lived and breathed a cappella music to the point where a group called Rockapella, which you might remember from a TV show called Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego that was on PBS during my youth, they sold out the Seattle Opera House. And they contacted me when I was 19 years old to introduce them live on stage in front of a sold-out crowd. This was when I was doing a 1-hour radio show at 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings, playing a cappella songs. And yet somehow I managed to make a name for myself strictly because I threw my enthusiasm out at the world from every direction and made it stick. It was going to stick somewhere. I definitely would have been a cappella girl if social media had existed then. And I imagine that probably I would have ended up with cameo in the Pitch Perfect movie or something, because there's something about my levels of enthusiasm that do just seem contagious. Sometimes it can be like a lot. Today, in fact, somebody called me the Queen of Extra, which I decided to take as a compliment, but I can see that not everybody's super into that. It's made for a great career as a broadcaster because I think it's something that people like to tune into. It's definitely, if we're getting real, it's been hard on personal relationships sometimes. I hate to use the word obsessed when it comes to people because that sounds like stalkery, and I don't think anyone's ever actually been in danger. But did you ever meet somebody and you were like, I want to be this person's best friend? And maybe you say to them, like, do you want to be best friends? And then you start treating them like you've been best friends for a year, even though you just met them, and maybe they want to take it a little slower and figure out who you actually are rather than decide in advance that you're going to love everything about each other. So yeah, I've lost some friendships and I think driven some people away because I got too excited about them in a way that was off balance, or like out of whack with the way that they sort of how long it took them to fall in love with me. I got ahead of myself. Let's put it that way. And I've learned to embrace the extra in me. And I think that's one reason that my radio career has been good. I think that's one reason my social media is popular, because you don't want to tune in to, say, a Broadway Girl Twitter feed and have her be like, the show was fine, I'm sort of into it. You want somebody who's going to represent almost like an archetype of the ultimate fangirl. I used to think, and actually I still do, who is the person in Middle America who maybe is a young person who doesn't have the means to get to Broadway, who maybe doesn't even live near enough to a city that has national tours to ever see a professional level theater production, who dreams of going to Broadway someday to just be in the audience. And then they look on social media and they see somebody complaining about there was an understudy on, or they see somebody complaining that the seats were in the balcony instead of in the orchestra, or they see somebody upset that somebody didn't do the stage door. And that person might be thinking, I would give anything I would take the worst seat in the house. I would see a full cast full of understudies. I don't care. I just want to be there. And so I always try to think from the perspective of that person and let them live this aspirational idea of what it means to be in the room, in the neighborhood, in the city, in the culture. And by thinking that way and broadcasting that way, whether it's broadcasting on the radio or whether it's broadcasting on social media or whether it's just sort of my general vibe in the world, the more I practice that for the benefit of that person in Middle America, or maybe in Spain, or in, I don't know where, I feel like there are people that follow me on social media from all over the world who probably will never make it to a Broadway show, but they feel like they're there, and I just want them to be able to live vicariously through me. So the more that I think about existing on behalf of other people and letting them live vicariously, the more I actually live and breathe that life. And the best lesson of Broadway Girl and creating a separate character for her was that I guess it's the way that actors go on stage and they become the character that they're playing for that 2.5 hours or whatever. My joy muscles, my ability to look at the world from the point of view of someone who is like, who sees the silver lining before they see the cloud, I think it's like a muscle. And I'm so happy that I put myself in a circumstance where I developed that muscle. It was almost an accident. I sort of realized it had happened or was happening after it happened. And in a weird way, like my radio broadcasting career started that way too. Like I said, I was doing this a cappella show from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And as far as I know, we had 0 listeners. But I want you to imagine a world in which computer automation did not exist. In the late 90s, college radio, we did not have a way to, for example, have songs play when no one was in the room. If somebody didn't press play on every single new song, the radio station would actually physically go off the air and there would be static. So the radio station was officially closed. This was KUPS Tacoma, 90.1 The Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and it was officially off the air from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. So only the people who came in at 7 had a key to the station. This key that I had to the station turned out to be the best gift I ever could have been given. The reason I was assigned the 7 a.m. slot was that the seniors running the radio station thought an a cappella radio show was the dumbest idea they'd ever heard. And they told me later that they gave people who they thought had stupid show ideas the morning slots on the weekends because they might not show up and it didn't matter to them. So, I mean, that's pretty fucked up. By the way, thank you to Derek and Romaine for creating a platform where you can say things like fucked up and not have to worry about, oh my God, what if I say a bad word? I'm going to get in trouble because I do have a little bit of a potty mouth, but I try to keep it under control. Anyway, I used that key and I started coming in at 4 a.m. when the last show went off the air. And instead of there being static from 4 a.m. to 7, I turned my 1-hour shift into a 4-hour shift. And then the other thing about this radio station was there was no academic requirement. There was also no repercussions for people who didn't show up. So it was purely an extracurricular activity. Nobody got paid. So especially towards mid-semester, a lot of people had gotten bored or they'd decide they need to study or they'd go out of town, and they never bothered to get replacement DJs for themselves because there was nothing compelling them to do so. I started hanging out in the radio station lobby doing my homework with my little key tucked in my pocket. And whenever somebody didn't show up for their show, I just jump in there. And I just thought I was playing. If somebody was scheduled for a hip hop show, I would go in and take their slot and I'd do the hip hop show. If somebody was scheduled to do like this was Seattle area, so there was a lot of sort of modern rock going on, the post grunge or late grunge era, and I'd like play that music. And I became this kind of radio chameleon, and I didn't know I was preparing for a career. I just kind of woke up one day and was like, oh, I'm good at this. And I think I spent a lot of my life not ever wanting to be bad at anything, and therefore being really hesitant to ever be new at something. And I've actually been thinking about that a lot this morning, because sitting here in this studio, radio is familiar to me. I did it for a long time, but I have not been on the radio with my own show in 4 years. I've never done it in this building. I've never done it with this particular equipment. There are all sorts of things that could potentially go wrong. And, we had a few little glitches this morning. Of course, everything's going fine. You're listening. I'm happy. But I also thought I was going to throw up about an hour ago, just because I say that's part of my process. But I sure wouldn't mind if that stopped being part of my process. I'm still to this day very uncomfortable being new at things. Actually, it was right after the TED Talk about 4 years ago. I was introduced to a book called Mindset by an author named Carol Dweck. This book is the closest thing I have to a religious text, and I keep it by my bed. I consult it all the time. I have listened to the audiobook probably 6 or 7 times. It basically is a book that teaches you how to think in terms of progress instead of results, and to reinforce the idea that being new at something is not the same as being bad at it. And that means that you are going to hear on this show about me learning to do this show. I'm not going to try to be perfect, and I'm so proud of that. I'm so glad that I am mostly over the idea of wanting to be perfect all the time. This is why I ditched the idea of the script, because when I scripted out the show, it was so that I could have a perfect first show. And I don't want to have a perfect first show, because if I have a perfect first show, then I have no room to grow, and growth is what it's all about. Growth mindset is what this book by Carol Dweck taught me. I feel like okay, so look, let's again, we're going to get honest. I sort of went off on a tangent about the book, and I forgot where I was going. And that's part of it. That's part of doing a live radio show without a sidekick, without a co-host. And so here we are. We're halfway through episode 1 of Laura Heywood Interviews. And in place of an interview, I'm giving you my backstory. The main thing I hope that you will understand about me is that I'm complicated, that I'm multidimensional, that I am really enthusiastic and really excited, and I'm also really serious about my work. I am so excited that for the first time ever, I am going to have the only say over who my guests are and who I get to dig in deep with. I've done over 150 long-form celebrity interviews. Most of them have been with Broadway people, because I am so well known and so recognized as Broadway Girl. This is amazing. I've also missed the chance to interview some people who are really important to me personally, because, for example, whoever was booking the show that I was working for at that time didn't think it made sense for quote unquote Broadway Girl to be interviewing, say, an entrepreneur or, an NFL Hall of Famer. Although I did interview Joe Montana, which you may have heard a little bit of in the intro. And at some point I'll do a retrospective of sports interviews. Actually, I have a clip from when I was working at a sports radio station, and they sent me to American Idol auditions, and I had to ask Simon Cowell about sports. This was sort of the opposite of what I'm like right now. I'm saying they won't let me talk about sports. Back in the days that I was working in sports radio, they would only let me talk about sports. And that's this weird thing about identity. Human brains are programmed to categorize things. Like, it all sort of comes from the days when cavemen had to know, like, is this a poisonous food or is this a safe food? We wouldn't survive if we didn't know how to sort things. And this is another one of my obsessions. We're definitely going to talk to some neurologists on this show. I promise it'll be interesting. I'm totally fascinated by the way the human brain works. But back in the day when I was like, quote unquote, sports girl, I couldn't talk to Simon Cowell about American Idol auditions. I talked to him about sports. So here's a little tiny clip from that era.
Simon Cowell. How are you, Simon?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, it's so nice to meet you. Are you a sports fan?
Not of American sports. I don't understand American football. You know, weird outfits, stop-start. I prefer soccer.
And who's going to win the World Series?
What's the World Series?
Baseball.
Oh, I couldn't.
Say the San Francisco Giants.
Oh, definitely the San Francisco Giants, whoever they are.
Excellent, Simon. Thank you. It was wonderful to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks, sweetheart.
That was a piece of an interview that was like 6 minutes long, where I kept being like, well, what about hockey? How about, I tried to ask him questions about European soccer, but I didn't really know anything about it. So that was probably the earliest celebrity interview I have a recording of. It's so easy to get pigeonholed. And all right, so this is another big piece of who I am, and something people often don't think of when they think of me, and that is this idea of I hate the word brand. I really, really hate the word brand, and I especially hate it as a verb, like branding. To me, it feels sort of like a faked version of authentic identity, and I think sometimes people get, because of this tendency to categorize and for people to want to easily identify the person or the company that they're interacting with, it's easier for them to attach a brand, something kind of one-dimensional to someone. And often we encourage that. I mean, look, I own the fact that I named my online character BroadwayGirlNYC, and that is why I got so many followers, was because people wanted to know what they were tuning in for. I use a lot of radio language when I talk about social media, because I think the reason I was good at social media, the reason that I picked it up without ever really knowing what I was doing, was because I innately treated Twitter back in 2009 when I started my account. I innately treated it like a broadcasting platform. I was really lucky because the majority of radio I'd been doing up to that point was co-hosting talk radio. And the difference between co-hosting and hosting is that the co-host is a responder. The co-host kind of represents the audience. So when the main host is talking about something they've researched really well, the co-host reacts in an authentic way. And if I was going to turn my mic on to react, it had to be brief, it had to be full of information, and it usually had to be funny, which essentially is what a tweet is. So I like to say that when Twitter came out, it was like I'd been practicing for 10 years for a sport that hadn't been invented yet. And then suddenly it was invented, and I had this unique skill set that set me up to be good at it. It may have appeared that I was just as new at it as everybody else because the format was new, but I wasn't really. I had, as Malcolm Gladwell talks about, the 10,000 hours. I've never actually calculated how many hours of radio I've worked, but it would not surprise me if it was close to that. And social media, to me, is another broadcasting platform. I brought a bunch of other clips that I think it would be fun to play. So I'm going to get into those in a little bit. I want to remind you that 844-TALK-DNR is the phone number, 844-825-5367. You can use that number if you're listening live. The show airs live 12 to 1 Eastern every Monday and Wednesday. You can also call that number and leave messages. Romaine is here. She's shaking her head. Romaine. There she is.
Am I there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There I am. Okay.
Look, we're new at this.
We are new at this. So
You're not.
I will tell you, if you'd like to call in when Laura's not live, it's very easy. You someone's here. I don't know who it is. Maybe it's one of your guests. Anyway, if you want to call in and leave a message for Laura, you call 917 900-1477, and you there's a whole menu that you listen to, and it will give you the option to leave a message, and that message will then be emailed to Laura, and she can play them on the show. And we on our show we call it the Hooker Hotline, but really it's just our answering
I'm not calling
machine.
it that.
No, you call whatever you want.
But that's a different phone number?
Yeah, it's a different phone number. I'll write it down for you so you have it. But it's 917-900-1477 is the number to leave a message. We do have a call on the line, though.
Should we take it unscreened and just see what happens?
Yeah, just hit the air 1 button.
I love what do you call it when you don't have the language, we don't have to screen things.
Oh yeah, you don't have to, none of that
uncensored.
crap.
Uncensored.
Totally
I'm looking
uncensored.
for. All right, let's go to, we have a call coming in from Minnesota.
Hello, Laura. Congratulations on your new show.
Thank you. What's your name?
My name is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
So I was just stumbling through on the Meta Player and found your show. So I've been listening for a little while. It's exciting to hear you. I've heard you before as a guest on Derek and Romaine. So I'm excited to hear what you have to do on your own show.
Thank
Especially
you.
as you mention, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
I know,
on your
right?
show.
This is both the coolest and the scariest thing about this show. It's like I have to figure out.
All up to you.
I have 2 hours a week to create the radio that I want to exist in the world, and that feels like a big job, but it also feels like a rare and very cool opportunity.
Yeah, no fences or telling you have to do sports. So what are you going to do? What can we look forward to in the coming weeks?
I love sports, so there will be some sports, but I promise it'll be interesting to non-sports fans too. I really, what I'm most obsessed with right now is the idea of personal growth, and athletes are super into talking about that. Every athlete and anybody who's gotten really involved in fitness knows that sometimes you have to show up and do a lot of work before you see any results. And it wasn't until I got really into fitness that I understood that the same kind of qualities applied to everything else that I wanted to do. That, for example, if I wanted to be a radio host, I couldn't just show up and expect to be great at it. I had to show up and be new at it. I was going to say I had to be bad at it for a long time, but I have to remind myself over and over. I tell myself this 100 times a day: being new at something is not the same as being bad at it. And every athlete definitely understands that. So if I do have sports folks in, that's kind of the kind of area we're going to do. I'm not going to be like, what was it like when I'm not going to ask them to break down the batting order or anything. There is going to be a lot of theater talk on this show. I think I've spent a lot of today discussing the fact that I'm not just Broadway girl. I'm not just Broadway girl. I'm still going to be Broadway girl probably at least half of the time. She, as I often refer to my alter ego, is very much in studio with me. And in fact, on Wednesday, Mandy Gonzalez from Hamilton is going to be in studio with me, and she's got a couple of concerts coming up. She also has an incredible movement that she's created online she calls Fearless Squad that actually inspired her hit single Fearless, and she's going to hang out with me for the full hour. So we'll talk to her about what it's like to be on Broadway. She has some incredible stories about, for example, they wanted her to change her name. Her agents told her that she would never get work with a name like Gonzalez. And she's gone on to play, Elphaba and Wicked, and she starred in the Heights, and now she's playing Angelica Schuyler. So she's she's the kind of person that I'm going to talk to. I'm really into music. I love to talk to chefs about cooking foods that have equal parts sort of nutritional elements and joyful elements. I guess if I had to sum it up, I would say I'm always interested in how to spread joy, and contagious enthusiasm tends to be my means of spreading joy. So I'm excited to bring people in who have their own perspective on spreading joy and amplifying their voices.
That's really cool. I had no idea that you would be covering such a wide range of folks.
That's why I called the show Laura Heywood Interviews, because it was the only thing that every show will have in common is me interviewing someone.
Interviewing somebody.
Yeah, so and in fact, in just a couple minutes, I'm going to be interviewing two very good friends of mine about my favorite nonprofit in the whole world. And that's another thing I want to make sure people know is that every episode will have an element of service, which is talking, whether it's my guest, like next show, Mandy Gonzalez, I'm going to ask her to talk about a particular charitable organization that's important to her and encourage people to seek that out, learn more, and maybe make donations. And I also will I'll invite every guest to do so, because to me, the important thing about having a voice, a public voice, is using it to make the world a better place. So.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. I look forward to hearing your show. And break a leg, as they say.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And you'll always have a very special place in my heart as my very first caller. Let me ask you this. What are you most passionate about in the world?
That's a really good question. I'm kind of a bit of a tech nerd person with creative aspirations. But what I think I like the most is connecting people and connecting things and making them work together and collaborate. That's what I like to do. I like to seek out collaboration and harmony.
I love that, and you've totally just connected with me. Oh, you know what? Look. Corny is amazing. So is joy. I find people want to apologize for what they love so often. And if I can make one little difference in the world, it would be like, own it. Like I said, somebody called me the queen of extra today. I've just stopped apologizing for the things that I love, corny or not. So I encourage you to just let your freak flag fly, as they say.
Sounds awesome. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, you guys. It's we've really made a dent in this first show of mine. I'm feeling really good. I want to just take you back. I'm going to play you a little bit of what I sounded like when I was on the air in college. I did my a cappella show for several years, and then I decided, all right, I'm going to really start working towards becoming a radio DJ. And I took on this full-on light rock, less talk voice. I was going to be an adult contemporary DJ. I did go on to do that. But I was listening to these old air check tapes. I actually, at 11 o'clock last night, I went out and I borrowed a cassette deck from somebody so that I could listen to this stuff. And this one, it made my heart kind of flutter, kind of like looking at baby pictures. And it also kind of made my face turn red, like, oh gosh, how far I've come. But I thought, look, if we're getting vulnerable today, this would be a fun thing to share.
Bare Naked Ladies love song Call and Answer on KUPS The Sound. I'm going to stay in the mellow frame of mind for the next two songs. James Taylor is coming up, as are the Indigo Girls. But before that, I'm going to expose you to a British band I've all but fallen in love with. Here's Travis with Driftwood on 90.1 The Sound. 90.1 The Sound with Rusted Root and Sending Me On My Way by request for Katie, who is just adorable on the phone. Think you're cuter than she is? Prove it by calling in with your own requests. The number is 879-3267. Now here's some upbeat country pop with the Dixie Chicks and Ready to Run with me, Laura, on 90.1 The Sound.
Oh, jeez. Baby Laura on the radio in Tacoma, Washington in circa 2001. All right. So it's time to do one more segment on the show. Why do we do one more segment on the show? Just cause, by which I mean we're going to talk about a just cause. I am welcoming into the studio my very good friends Lee Overtree and Kalia Davis, who are joining me from Story Pirates. Welcome, you guys.
Hey, Laura.
Hi. Tell us about Story Pirates.
Story Pirates is a company that believes that kids have the best ideas. And we take kids' ideas and we turn them into awesome shows in schools. We turn them into podcasts and books. And we love kids' ideas and bring them to life with shows with professional actors and And it's amazing. We love it.
I love it too. And Story Pirates was, I would say, a very good example of the way that for me, in my personal life, the way that contagious enthusiasm can go a long way. Lee, should we tell the story of how I became involved with Story Pirates?
I would love to.
I'd love to hear your side of the story, but and I'll tell my side of the story first, and then you tell me whether it matches up with what you remember.
Well, I'll tell you what I use this story as an example for, which is that you never know what good can come from a situation that maybe isn't ideal.
We met at a very, very strange event. Yes. I had a friend from college who was playing a 10-minute set as part of a 4-hour benefit show in like a weird performance art space. And
it was at La Mama. You didn't want to say it.
La Mama won the Tony Award for Regional
Theater
last year.
It.
They're amazing. I thought I was going to see something that was a little more traditional musical theater, and I did not know the show was going to be 4 hours long. But I did want to support my friends from college, so I went to check them out. And there was some strange stuff there.
It was just one of those shows that we did for free as a favor, and I had to go to all the Story Pirates and be like, please do this show for free. Mm-hmm. We need all the publicity we can get. I don't know much about the show, but I think it's going to be awesome.
Nobody got paid for it, right?
Nobody got paid for it, but we obviously rehearsed our butts off and went down, and I, as Story Pirates always does, brought 1 million people.
Yep.
And we did this show, and it was really long, and
you guys were last.
We were last. It was just excruciating to and there's a difference in when you go to a show and you're appreciating the artistry of the people that are there, and then when you go to a show and you sort of it's not your vibe and you have to go on later, and it's just it took forever.
Well, so so I was sitting there in the audience. My buddies had gone on to do their 10-minute musical theater-esque set, and then there were mime clowns and
it was a lot of performance art.
Yeah, it was a lot of performance art and probably if I saw it now, I'd have more of a context in which to put it. But
for sure,
I still was. What year was this? 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
It was shortly after I moved to New York, and really my understanding of theater was pretty limited. Then all of a sudden, this group of basically big kids came out. I mean, they were all my age, but they had the energy of a play group or a preschool or something. Right. Boundless energy, really fun music. I had no idea, by the way, that Story Pirates was a charity, that it was done for good. But the first thing, it was you, Lee. You came out on stage and you said, we're Story Pirates, and we perform songs and sketches based on stories written by real kids. And I thought, I love that. And you proceeded to put on the funniest 40-minute show I have ever seen in my life. And I thought, I want to be a part of that. I got to be a part of it.
And you really became a part of it. And
it took some convincing. I mean, look, now, full disclosure.
It didn't take much convincing. You did a lot right away.
No, I mean, I had to convince you guys to let me in.
I don't think so.
Well, again, this is why it's fun to tell both sides of this story, because the way I remember it, I should just full disclosure say I'm on the board of directors of Story Pirates now, so spoiler alert, that's how this story ends. I remember going up to either you or one of the other Story Pirates who had a very visible role and saying can I play? And hearing, well, we get that a lot. You can't just sign up. We have an audition process, and we're professionals, so you can't just come to work one day. But if you could just keep coming to shows, and maybe you could volunteer to take tickets sometime. Mm-hmm. And I sort of felt like it was almost a brush off. I mean, not a brush off, but
I'm sure
I had to earn my I had to earn my way in.
Sure.
I think that one of the things about doing something that looks so fun is that it seems like the kind of thing that isn't work. Uh-huh. And I know now how much work actually goes into it. In fact, Kalia, you're a performing Story Pirate.
I am.
And I would love to just take a break from our origin story for a second and find out about.
I love that
how.
story.
Well, we're going to get back to it, but I want to hear more about what your role is in Story Pirates and how you discovered the organization.
Totally. So I actually, fun fact, started in Los Angeles. So Story Pirates originated in New York City and then got a really great partnership out in Los Angeles, originally with the Geffen Playhouse. And I had just graduated from college. I went to USC, and I knew that my passion was in performing and creating content for kids and family entertainment. So I was just researching online that type of statement. Like
what did you
family
Google?
Entertainment. I Googled family entertainment, and the Geffen came up, and it had a cute little icon for Story Pirates. So I clicked it, and it didn't send me to anybody from Story Pirates. It sent me to the Geffen Playhouse instead. So I sent a blind email, which I love to do, and they directed me to Duke Doyle, who's one of the original members of Story Pirates that got to go and head the Los Angeles chapter. And then he was so wonderful as well, kind of not doing a total brush off, but definitely letting me know, like, this is when the auditions are. We would love to have you. Come on out. And I went, and I'm a musical theater baby myself, so not a lot of improv. I did some in college, some in high school. So when I got to go, and the auditions, for those that don't know, the auditions as a performer are actually some of the best auditions experiences you could possibly have.
I didn't know. Like, what is?
Yeah, we actually just have you rehearse as if you were already a story pirate. So they bring in a story, an actual real story written by a kid. One of the directors, there's many of us that are story pirates that are directors, and they will sit there with you and they'll build a story. And so you actually get to go through the entire process of what it's like to be a story pirate in just an audition. And then if they like how you're vibing with them and you're getting that technique that they have, that they've honed, they'll invite you back and you'll do the exact same thing again, a new story. And it's really, really cool because you're already experiencing what it's like to be a story pirate. And so I started in 2011 in Los Angeles. And when I moved out here to New York, I just picked it right back up because something that's so beautiful is that they say once you're a story pirate, you're a story pirate for life. And that means wherever you are. So even though I took a few years off to do a children's tour and I said I'm going to New York, Lee, Peter, Joanna, all these lovely people that I had known from years before were like, yeah, we know, come back.
Yeah.
We got you.
Well, and it isn't an LA company and a New York company. It's all one company.
Exactly.
Story Pirates are welcome to go back and forth between coasts, and we also do a lot of shows in, on tour. We're available to look if you know a school that has a PTA budget and wants to bring us out to a school anywhere in the world. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and one of the great things is that while there are schools that will hire story pirates to come in and do programs, and then we always look for low-income schools in the neighborhood that we can, build into an itinerary. And there are also shows open to the public, same stories, same show, for ticket. For the general public to buy tickets, and then the cost of those tickets help support low-income schools, which is kind of the heart and soul of what Story Pirates is about.
Yeah, Story Pirates Changemakers is our nonprofit partner that is dedicated to bringing Story Pirates programs, creative writing workshops, shows to Title I schools and shelters, because it's really important to us that every kid learns the power of their own voice. And when the creativity of these actors, these performers, these musicians is used to amplify the voices of children, it's a powerful lesson in what they have to give. And we think that it inspires learning in a very deep sense.
Absolutely. There is nothing like being in a room with a kid who's hearing and seeing their idea come to life for the first time. And it's almost like you can watch their brain grow and their understanding of their own importance in the world. It's like watching a flower bloom.
Right. Yep.
I can't believe it. We're almost out of time, but I want to finish the origin story by saying, when I felt pushback that said you're going to have to work for this, I didn't get discouraged. I actually showed up and volunteered to take tickets. My favorite part of the story is that I just started inviting everyone I knew to the shows. And there was one where I think I had something like 15 people come to the basement of the Drama Bookshop. And as they were all being manually checked in on a clipboard, it was, how did you hear about us, Laura Heywood? How did you hear about us, Laura Heywood? How did you hear about us? I was the last one to arrive. And they were like, name? And I said, Laura Heywood. And they went, whoever it was went, who are you? And I went, I'm in.
Exactly.
I'm in. And it's been more than 10 years now, and I'm actually in the middle of an annual fundraiser I do in honor of my birthday, which is coming up in just a month. So go to storypirates.org/donate. My goal is to raise $4,440 in honor of my 40th birthday, which is April 28th. So I would love for you to chip in, whether it's the full $40, whether it's just a fraction of that, or whether you want to donate the full $4,440, then we can call off the rest of the fundraiser.
Great.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
If you wanted to throw in one more plug, what would it be?
Sure. Well, the Story Pirates have a great podcast. If you haven't heard, you should check it out. Every week we have new stories and songs written by kids and special guests like John Oliver, Claire Danes, Dax Shepard. It's free to download.
And it is so fun, whether you're an adult or a kid.
It really is.
It really is all ages listening.
So go to storypirates.com to check out that podcast, check out our books, and find out more about our programs.
And make sure to tune back to Laura Heywood Interviews on Wednesday.
Coming up on Wednesday, Laura Heywood Interviews
Mandy Gonzalez from Hamilton. It has been such an honor to be here with you today for my very first show with DNR Studios. I want to thank Kevin in Minnesota for calling in. I want to thank Romaine for coming in ridiculously early to be a part of the show with me. And we are going to keep this up, keep learning together, keep being part of this incredible family. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Laura Heywood, and this is Laura Heywood Interviews.